is the Bristol Flyers podcast.
Hello, welcome back to the Bristol Flyers podcast, proudly sponsored by WebGains. Joel Osborne, Sam Hardy with you as always. Sam, how's it going?
Yes, my man. Why were you doing that with the sound?
Just riding the beat, you know what I mean? That was quite cool. How are we doing, Sam? You all good?
Oh, I am doing a lovely job. Just got back from it sounds like I've just been away all the time. Just got back from a few days in Switzerland.
How was it? Was it good?
It was absolutely glorious, by the way. Just beautiful sunshine, snowy mountains, beautiful.
Mate, I'm well jealous.
I know, sorry.
We've got producer Dan over there pushing the buttons as always. Producer Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm all right, thanks, gents. Do I sound rough?
Sound a bit bunged up, my friend.
Yeah, I feel a bit rough.
Oh,
Do you know what? You don't sound as rough as you look, so all good.
Thanks, good. That's good.
There you go. It seems like everyone's going away recently. Like producer Dan out in Spain last week, then you go off this week. You leave me here to hold the fort during the season.
When are you getting away, Joy? Got any holidays booked?
Nothing booked at the moment, but obviously we've got another 2 months of the regular season to go. So got to work first, and then I might book something soon. But we'll see.
Did you manage to get Glasgow tickets this year or not?
No.
Oh, Joel.
I'm trying for resale. So if any podcast listeners are trying for resale and need an extra person to try for, please get in touch because I'm urgently in need of a ticket, and I will pay you if you get me a ticket. I'll pay you extra money.
We need to know what admin's up to during the summer. Like, if you don't go to Glasgow, mate, what content are we going to get?
Well, that's it. So hopefully I need to get back to the farm. Did you get a chance to watch Surrey Scorchers at the weekend?
I did. I watched it on silent because it would have been rude not to, but I had it on my knee watching the game and I could see it was a close one, but no cigar, Jolie.
Yeah, well, we will talk about the Surrey Scorchers game later on in the show. Coming up on this week's show, we're marking International Women's Day as Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights joins us in the studio to talk about women in sport. We're also going to be highlighting the work of our Flyers Women's and Junior Girls programme. Plus, we'll be discussing the increasing number of women in senior management positions at the British Basketball League. But first, Sam, last week we spoke about it on the podcast. Last week was your comedy chest.
I don't know why you keep going on about this, Joel.
This is the last time we'll go on about Comedy Chest, but producer Dan and I, we went down to the Comedy Chest, didn't we, Dan?
We did, and this will be the last time we talk about it because it was awful. No, I'm kidding. It was really good. It was great. I had a really good time.
Thanks for coming, guys. It was nice to see your faces there. Ro popped down as well, which was fun.
Yeah, we had a good number of us, didn't we? We had Alex from the team behind the team at Brown Vox, myself, Mike Ekins and Joe Ekins down there. Shout out to them. And RGB, a surprise appearance. I think there were some podcast listeners as well up there.
Yeah, I think in total I counted 13 people who wouldn't have come unless they'd heard it on the pod.
Really?
Or whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, well, there you go. The podcast making waves.
Who do we send the invoice to, Sam, for that? For
commission on ticket sales. Yeah.
No,
right.
no, and we don't get paid ourselves down there. Okay, we just get nice, delicious food, and we get our beers paid for, and then we crack on.
It was a great night of entertainment. We're going to go back, aren't we, Dan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going back this month.
Larry Dean, the headliner, was insane, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was, yeah. So if you want to listen to Sam, he does the comparing duty over at the Bristol Comedy Chest. The last Thursday of every month, just Google Bristol Comedy Chest and you'll be able to get yourself some tickets. But yeah, that is the last we will speak of the Comedy Chest here in the podcast. Might bring it up one day, but yeah. I know you don't like us talking about your Comedy Chest, Sam.
It's not, yeah.
Right, should we get to on that note, should we get to our interview with Lisa Knights? Now, this is a really good conversation, Sam, because it always feels a bit weird when you chat to the boss. But there's some really great topics highlighted here. I mean, this is a very important conversation for us to be having on the podcast.
All the things she touches on, we've not really heard a lot of the things as well. Some of it is like quite fresh and quite new, and yeah, really interesting. Good for us to learn. I do lose my job at the end though, so if you don't see me ever again, I've been fired. Nice knowing you all.
Well, let's get to it. Here's our interview with Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights.
This is the Bristol Flyers podcast.
Hey Flyers fans, this is the part of the show where we give a huge thank you to our podcast sponsor WebGains. We've got Rob over there in the house, and without their support, this podcast would not be possible.
Now, WebGains is the smart affiliate marketing network who have an unbelievable track record when it comes to empowering advertisers and publishing partners to reach their potential and achieve game-changing results.
They connect businesses with top affiliates who can promote your products and services, reaching a wider audience and driving more revenue.
And here's the best bit, Flyers fans. WebGains provides you with detailed reports and analytics to track the performance of your affiliate marketing campaigns, making it easy to see the results of your hard work and investments.
But don't just take our word for it. Here's Rob from WebGains to tell you more.
Did you know that last year affiliates helped sell 12 billion worth of products for British brands? And every £1 spent on affiliate marketing by advertisers, also known in our channel as retailers, returned an average of £12.40.
That is actually crazy when you spend £1.
You get £12 back.
£12.40 back. It's so good.
It's amazing.
It's a good deal, isn't it?
And not only are WebGains sponsors of the Bristol Flyers podcast, but their company logo is also once again on the front of our home and away playing shorts, inspiring the team to make smarter connections, just like they do for thousands of brands on their international affiliate network.
So if you're ready to skyrocket your online presence and drive more sales, visit webgains.com and see how they can assist you in the world of affiliate marketing.
That's webgains.com, webgains.com. Give your business the assist it needs with WebGains Affiliate Network.
This is the Bristol Flyers podcast.
All right, welcome back to our International Women's Day special of the Bristol Flyers podcast. And we're very pleased to be joined in studio by Bristol Flyers CEO Lisa Knights. Lisa, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello again. It's been a while.
It has been a while. It's been 6 months, really, since the last time we had you on. 6 months since you were
Goodness.
appointed Chief Executive.
Is that honestly how long it's been?
Yeah, well, that's when we put the press release out, wasn't it?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it didn't seem like that long ago that I was in studio, but it was a few months ago, yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
6 months, obviously, since the announcement. How do you look back on those 6 months so far?
I feel like I've barely got my feet under the table. I mean, with any new role, it's really doing a lot of listening and talking to people, and I've by no means met everyone that I need to so far that is involved with this fantastic club, because when we're talking about Flyers, in my role as CEO of effectively the men's first team, but I am acutely aware that there is a whole Flyers family that goes into building this team. I was talking with Andreas last week about something, and he said, I've spent 19 years building this, and sometimes, it's all very new to me. I'm still learning loads of the faces and the people around SGS and within the basketball world. But you have to have very much in the back of your mind, this has been 19 years in the building. And there is a whole community of support that goes into not just putting on our elite first team men's games, but the whole pathway from grassroots right the way up.
Yeah, and like you say, there is a huge community behind the Bristol Flyers, and I can imagine trying to go out and reach out to all those different people. It's the only thing, it can take time, can't it?
I spend most of my time in the office or when I'm at SGS just talking to people, and you can never underestimate how important conversations are and what you learn from people. I spend quite a bit of time when I go to watch the games talking to fans that come up to me, and I know I said last time, please come up and talk to me, because just because I haven't spoken directly to you, it doesn't mean I don't want to. I love hearing what people's opinions are. I've enjoyed getting to know the volunteers. I mean, they are such a critical part, and I was speaking at an event earlier in the week about International Women's Day. And I referenced the Flyers in this era of professional sport, we're so focused on the commercials of how we can financially achieve long-term financial sustainability. But I would never like to lose the Flyers community side of us, no matter, even if we became, if the BBL took off and we're the next biggest league outside of the NBA, that's the hope for the next 10 years. I would hope we never lose that community feeling of volunteers. Because it is such an important part of the fabric of the club. And, often volunteers, a lot of them are skewed towards the female demographic. So it is good that we're talking about it in the week of International Women's Day.
Yeah. Well, before we do dive into International Women's Day, just quick reflections on the men's season so far. Obviously, mixed results on the court, a successful European campaign with the playoffs coming up this week. Like, your thoughts as a whole on the season?
Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts are it's been a season of firsts, good and bad. Okay, the bad is that we've had a series of almost freak accidents and injuries to players. I mean, it has probably been one of the most challenging seasons so far, I think, for the coaching team. And that's not something I can help at all and would never try and get involved in. But, just trying to support Andreas and Nick and Chris and Mike Edkins just through that. Me coming into the role is to try and relieve some of the issues that I can help with, but I can't help with performance, and I can't help with the coaching setup and the injuries that they've had to deal with. It completely changes the dynamic of a team.
What do you think about the European campaign so far?
It's just, it has been so the right thing to do. You know, financially it's tough. You know, part of the CEO role is to juggle the books and look at the, you know, the financials of how it goes. And I'm not going to lie, it's presented a lot of challenges from a financial point of view, not least with club travel. It's been a very expensive thing to do, but it's absolutely been the right thing to do. I mean, in terms of raising our awareness, not just within Bristol, but domestically and also internationally. That's the bit that we want to be. You know, in the long-term plan, we want to be a team that is achieving in Europe and punching at the very top of the BBL within the domestic league. And actually doing this, it was our little sort of first foray, and it's been a really positive experience, you know, and the way the fans have embraced it as well, because we sell out and we have, you know, we've traditionally always sold out and we've got season tickets. Because those aren't season ticket games, it's been a chance for us to engage a whole new audience. And I think, you know, the data we'll look at the end of the season, but it has, we've won over a whole new audience, and people that have come down that traditionally hadn't had a ticket, have been able to get a ticket for the European Games. And I think from that perspective as well, building that whole new fan base has been really, really positive.
What about off the court? So, you know, you mentioned that we talked about the stuff on the court. Off the court right now, in terms of the business behind the scenes, what's some of the biggest challenges? What's the main focus points right now?
It's been like I said, it's been a season of unique challenges. I think that some of the challenges that Mike and Andreas and the coaching team probably haven't ever faced before. We've talked about it being partnerships and you know, it's a community within Flyers, and of course we have our academy program, and the pathway program is run with our partners at SGS, and players come through that, boys and girls. But the facility is a challenge. I mean, Kevin Hamlin, who is in charge over at SGS, has been one of the most brilliant advocates for basketball coming through SGS. And he has been so supportive of the Flyers being at SGS. But we've outgrown it, which is a good, nice problem to have. But, you know, we're about to go into our 10th anniversary season of being in the professional league. And the plan, if anyone had stuck to the script, the plan was to be playing that in our brand new arena just next door to us here at Ashton Gate. And that plan hasn't materialised. And I won't go over all the reasons why it hasn't yet, but most of them are circumstances completely beyond our control. But the facilities is the biggest challenge that we have on a regular basis. So making that's probably created one of the biggest headaches throughout the last season, I would say.
Yeah, I know you gave us an update on it last time you were on the podcast. A lot of people have seen in the Bristol Post that, of course, now Wicks has cleared out. So essentially that whole area of land is completely clear, ready to go from our point of view. Any further updates on where we're at on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sad to say no is the short answer. I hope, watch this space, we will have an update soon. Yes, Wicks has now finished next to it, and there's a whole lot of empty space there that, you know, a lot of people will look at and go, well, can't we just put something there? Can't we just go into the Wicks building? You know, it's not the most ridiculous of suggestions. The problem is that could hamper the build. We are ready to start and go. The problem has been this judicial review, and the problems with COVID is the backlog in courts. And there is still no date for the judicial review to even be heard in court. So until ETM and the waste company decide whether or not, you know, if they were to withdraw the judicial review on Bristol City Council's decision to grant planning over at Longmoor, then we could start tomorrow. But we aren't in that position yet.
Well, fingers crossed we can get some really good news very, very soon indeed. Let's switch focus to International Women's Day. And of course, the theme for International Women's Day this year is investing in women, accelerating progress. It's all about highlighting the importance of gender equality. And I think for us, from a Flyers point of view, it's important to talk about this because a lot of people will see the Flyers logo, and they'll assume that it's all essentially owned and operated by the same people. But it's important for us to stress that the men's team is operated by us at Bristol Sport, and the rest of the player pathway from under 12s all the way through up until the men's second team, the women's first team as well, is run by our partners at SGS College, and they do a fantastic job of that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bourne, everyone sees on the court side, you know, he's involved, as you say, from grassroots right the way through to the elite level of the men's first team. it comes back to that community piece. We can't take any credit for that pathway because it's run and operated by SGS, but actually what we can do is provide a platform and a ability to be able to widen the message. And for that, I hope that long continues, because actually we're only as good as what you're putting in at grass community level to grow that player pathway. And I do think that that's something that Bristol Sport and the sporting group, we should be proud of. And sometimes Bristol Sport is a little bit sort of apologetic almost for its existence. But actually it's quite refreshing when I step out of our bubble and I hear people talk about Bristol Sport at a national level, or, in other different areas of business and other different sports. They talk really positively about for the work that it's done, because actually what it does is it is able to amplify messages. And the numbers, there is an appetite. We never said we wanted to inspire sport in our community and just the male sport in our community. That double-header game, I want to do more of those. I hope we can do more of those, because we'd said that we think there's an opportunity here to support, and actually, the data from that game showed that there is a massive untapped audience there. 91% of the people that came to the women's game did not have a ticket for the men's game. They came specifically for the women. Now that shows you there is an opportunity there.
Yeah, and as you say, Bristol Sport, it is playing its part in helping the women's programme grow up at SGS. I mean, you look at the commercial team, for example, supporting with finding sponsorship, and the Capital Resourcing Group, CRG, as the women's principal partner. That's a partnership that has come through us at Bristol Sport. I mean, you look at Flyers chairman Mike Beasley, his son, that's his company, CRG, and Mike Beasley, of course, came on board with the Flyers, the British Basketball League team, as RSG back in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, and a shout out for Mike Beasley. He has been an incredible ambassador and mouthpiece for basketball. I don't think it would have been a sport 20 odd years ago that he'd have thought, I know I'm going to be supporting that. And he's still, chair of our Flyers board. He's a huge advocate for the sport. And yeah, as you say, that's translated as well. He's put his money where his mouth is, where previously RSG was sponsoring, our sporting group teams and was sponsoring Flyers. And now to have the next evolution, his son's company have got involved. But there's a financial argument for being involved, and it's a positive financial argument. And we hope we can deliver more of that. And that's where I think Bristol Sport can help. And I hope that we can help more and more.
Yeah, and let's talk about the women's doubleheader, of course, because we really got behind it, didn't we, Sam? We essentially ran it exactly the same way as we would for a British Basketball League game. Packed house at SGS for their game against Loughborough Riders. How inspiring is this to see? This is very much a new audience that we haven't seen for the Flyers in the British Basketball League.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, really gutted because I wasn't able to be at the game. I was actually speaking overseas, but I was getting sent pictures of this, and I had so many people message me going, wow, this is amazing, because when we said we were going to do it, we weren't sure if we were going to get another sellout, in inverted commas, and we did. We had just under 750 people packed SGS-wise to go and watch a women's basketball team, and I really hope that we can do more of those games. The more that people see that, and the more that becomes normal, the more we will be able to get sponsorship and commercials behind it, and they won't be looking at it as it's not comparing a women's game with a men's game. It's got a whole separate audience, and actually the match day experience should be different as well.
Mm-hmm. It was loud in there as well, Joel. It wasn't like, oh, we don't know what we're doing, like a timid audience. They were going for it. The women were playing amazing. They won the game by, 10 in the end, I think? Yeah. But the crowd was so good, and they were new fans, a lot of them, I think. A lot of kids as well, which is great. We need to see the kids coming to games and going, wow, I want to get involved. I want to play basketball. And yeah, it's just given that opportunity. It was a really exciting game.
Yeah, that's the big thing, isn't it? For if Bristol Sport can play its part in supporting the team and creating role models that kids can look up to, that's essentially what it's all about, inspiring the next generation.
Yeah, and anyone that ever listens to me talk about sport, all children should be playing some form of sport. Now, that doesn't have to be competitive sport. It can just be activity, but all children should be involved in some sport. And if, you say, oh, my child's not sporty, well, they just haven't found the right sport for them yet. And actually just opening up that opportunity to see, or we had Katie from Pledge Ball, who's the founder of Pledge Ball, at our green game on Saturday night, and I stood chatting with her, and she's probably not a natural for basketball because I think, forgive me, Katie, she's about 4'11". So basketball's probably not the most natural sport for her affinity. Her husband's very tall, I think. But she just came and she just went, it's the most, she came from a football background. She just said, it's amazing. She said, you've converted me to basketball. And that's, I love the thing about basketball is the energy, the welcomeness, the inclusion. You never feel like you're out of place. Whereas going to a hardcore football game or something, you can sometimes slightly feel like there could be a barrier that you're not welcome. Whereas it's that inclusivity that I think basketball very naturally has that is one of its best assets.
Yeah, and if games like that can inspire, the next generation of girls players that want to get involved, I mean, there is a whole bunch of ways they can get involved, whether that be through the Bristol Sport Foundation, whether that be through the junior teams at SGS. There's we're one of the only clubs in the country, Flyers, that has steps for every single age group, from under 12s all the way through 14s, 16s, 18s, the women's national league team, to inspire girls to get playing the game.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was doing an interview earlier with Lauren Smith from City Women. So she's the head coach of City Women, but she's got an all-female coaching staff. And that is so rare. In a WSL team, actually having women coaching women. And again, it's where does it stop? It shouldn't stop. We're talking about getting girls' inclusion in grassroots level of sport from, each player pathways for children. And they can play mixed up until certain ages. But actually having that pathway behind the scenes in the coaching teams, in the operational teams. We're really lucky in Bears Women and City Women. We've got 2 operations women who are women within the women's team. So it's that pathway, everyone talks about see it to be it, but it is hugely important.
Yeah, and we have to give a nod as well to the Bristol Sport Foundation because, of course, they're also playing their part in getting young girls playing basketball at a very young age. They've got the TOTS basketball now, which is for kids literally from as soon as you can walk. Rodney's like, yep, get them out there, let's play basketball. We had Rodney on a previous episode of the podcast, what was it, last season, and he spoke about all the projects being done by the Bristol Sport Foundation in detail. But this year, for example, they've launched a girls-only hub now for girls to get involved. And you spoke about growing up a lot of sports, you're mixed, your boys and girls up until a certain age group. The importance of having a girls-only hub at a young age is crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, because girls, girls, when you go into sport as a girl, and it's that, the shoes that you walk in, a lot of boys won't see any barrier and be like, well, why wouldn't they play? But actually, as a girl, turning up to a sporting event and being the only girl, and I can speak from experience, I was the only girl in the player pathway for my sport, for water polo, all the way through to, it was only at the end of middle of university years that I started playing for a women's team. I played in a men's team the whole time, and I was talking to Sarah Byrne, who is an England Red Rose. She's probably the most talented prop in the world. She's on a centralised England Red Roses contract. She's a phenomenal player, and she was talking about the fact that it was lucky it didn't put her off playing at a young age because the boys wouldn't pass to her. And she said what happened was one boy did finally pass to me and I ran the length of the field and then they went, let's pass the ball to Berner. And so it became a 61 capped England international. But it's so important for girls to feel like they've got this, they've got a peer group, they've got a place to be there. They're not the odd one out. So everything that we can do and BSF can do, and I'm so pleased that, BSF have, they've got a female CEO now, Sarah Morterboys, who I know you're going to have on the show at some point.
Yeah, we were trying to get her on for this one, but
she
she wasn't available. Yeah,
but she will be soon. And that whole having females in those roles to show that there is pathway and opportunity is so critical. And we can't train basketball coaches quickly enough. So if anyone wants to retrain as basketball coaches, to deliver those hubs and clubs, it's so important. Rodney is fantastic at inspiring, and he does spot it. He is a coach that does identify that, and that is a challenge as well, because often a male coach wouldn't even think about the fact that, well, of course you could, because the male coach will think, well, of course I'm giving you opportunity because you're here playing. But actually having the cognizance to realise that actually having a few more girls in the programme or identifying them to empower them to play and want to stay playing. And the change that has happened in women's sport in the last 15 or 20 years is phenomenal. And I think it's a bit like the growth of the internet. You know, it took 30 or 40 years for Tim Berners-Lee to get to the point of here's the world, you know, the web introduced to the world. It took 20 odd years for him to get to that point. But actually the exponential use of it has been incredible in the last 5 or 10. And I think that's a bit like women's sport. I think the changes, it's taken so long, and there are so many women that have played their part to get it to this stage, you know, from the 56, you know, we've got a lady in our office, Bridget, who works, and she played for Bristol City, you know, what was Bristol City Women effectively, and she's got a picture of her, and then they weren't allowed to play because the FA banned women's football. You know, it's incredible. But now we're in a world where women have a pathway and are fully, you know, full-time professional football players or basketball players.
Yeah.
It's positive, because I think the next 5 years are going to see that gap narrow even more.
Yeah, the growth has been exponential, like in terms of equality and driving equality, and we actually had a message come through from on X, formerly known as Twitter, from @BezzyMagic recently, and this one is all about inspiring the next generation. And they said, "I need the Bristol Flyers podcast team to sell basketball to my daughter. She's already followed my wife's sport of swimming. Sounds like an easy sale, but I failed." Of course, Lisa, you know full well about swimming.
That's a tough one. I don't know how I'm torn.
What would you do to sell basketball over swimming to someone? You know, we have a lot of listeners out there that maybe have daughters that want to get involved in basketball. How would you sell basketball to them?
Look, from basketball point of view, I look at it and go, it's an indoor, dry, warm sport. So as a parent, a lot of the time you're facilitated by your parents, and I am so thankful that my children do sports that are indoors and warm. It's a team sport. And team sports I would recommend all children take part in a team sport, because it teaches you such valuable life lessons. You know, it teaches you bonding. It teaches you how to get on with people. Sometimes you like and some people you don't like. It teaches you to find ways, around that.
I pointed at Joel in case you didn't realise.
Yeah, and a ball sport, a team sport that involves throwing and catching a ball. It's a really important part of the national curriculum. You have to learn, you know, the national curriculum I think is still learn to swim, a ball sport, and a team sport.
That's you know, it's an inspiring answer, Lisa, but here's an answer for you, BezzyMagic. I've heard that chlorine doesn't really smell until it's mixed with stuff like urine. So if you smell the chlorine coming out of the water, that is someone peeing in the pool.
I don't think that's true.
Lisa, this is what I've heard, okay?
So not true.
I think what I would say is, like, if you're a parent right now listening to, like, or watching this show on YouTube, and you've got a daughter that wants to get into basketball, and maybe you don't want to watch the British Basketball League team, I would always suggest coming down, watching the Flyers women down at SGS, completely free to go watch down at SGS, and the players, super, super inspiring. They'll talk to you after the game. They've got plenty of time for everyone that comes to watch. If you can't watch it in person, go watch it on YouTube. We stream all the home games on Flyers TV. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, it's on this channel, so go down and watch them, and hopefully you can have your child converted to basketball away from swimming.
Any parent will know, as much as you know have a plan, it comes from they have to love it.
Yeah.
You know, I would just take them to all sports. Basketball is a great place to start because it is so friendly. I mean, that's what I've been blown away by is, you know, it's not a sport that I played. I had no real involvement other than from when I joined Bristol Sport in 2014 and came to my first basketball game and was hooked. And I've loved it ever since. Whereas at a football game, you feel like, oh my goodness, I couldn't possibly. There is none of that in basketball. And I do think actually the other thing with basketball is there's no legacy audience. You know, it's not set in stone how you should support, or, you know, what a basketball fan should look like. I love the fact that when I go and watch Flyers or any basketball game around the country, it's a big mix of a crowd.
Yeah. And also, one thing I would say is, if you are inspired, if you're a young girl watching the Flyers women, for example, and you are super, super inspired to take up basketball, as we mentioned earlier on the podcast, Bristol, the pathway at SGS is one of the only pathways that does have, you know, under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, under 18s teams all playing basketball. So if you want to play at a more competitive level, you can do. Or if you want to just get into it, see if it's something for you, the Bristol Sport Foundation, as you say, the girls' only hubs are the perfect way to get involved in basketball.
And petition your school. as
Yeah.
well. You know, that's the other piece, is the school piece is such a massive part. Where, you know, BSF and Bristol Sport are working with a number of schools in the city to try and help that pathway. But it's really hard. It comes back to facilities again, which, you know, in this country it is hard because we're lacking in facilities.
Yeah. We've spoken about the club. Let's switch hats. Let's put the British Basketball League hat on.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because I know, because a lot of listeners may not know that you actually are a board member of the British Basketball League as well, aren't you?
I am. I do have the dubious honour of sitting on the British Basketball League. Yeah, I was appointed, I think, just over a year ago. It's been a busy last year. Board diversity is really, really important, and it's not something that we've got right, I don't think, traditionally across many things. I'm not talking just BBL. There needs to be more diversity across boards, because diversity representation leads to different ways of thinking and solving problems. And, you know, there's enough data to show that there's a reason why you should have board diversity. I've been really honoured to sit on it. It's really interesting. It's fascinating trying to deal with the mechanics of. So I sit on it currently with Yuri Matishin, who is the owner of Sheffield, and we're the two CRDs. So there's two club representative director roles, and you get voted on into that space with three independent executive directors, and it's been great. It's been very interesting because I deal a lot with all the shareholders of across the team. So Yuri and I often are talking to other clubs, and actually one of the things that I've really noticed is, and she's been tremendously kind and supportive and helpful to me, is Sarah Bakovich. She's a rare breed. She's incredible in that she does all the commercial stuff. She does the GMing. She's literally, you know, she is a whirlwind of a woman and a force to be reckoned with. And she's been involved in basketball for, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but more than 20 years. And actually having a seat at the table, it's interesting in this theme of International Women's Day, where we talk about women's representation. You know, she's been a lone wolf, if you like, at that table. And very often it's interesting watching the dynamics that people will phrase women, and I'm not referring to Sarah, but often people will say, you know, oh, well, you know, she had a lot to say for herself, or she was argumentative. And all the things that they often describe women as in a negative way are things that they would normally describe in a positive way for men. But because there isn't a number of women speaking in the same way, because there just aren't women at that table, you can often get singled out. So I'm really thankful that I've got someone like Sarah, who knows everything that there is to know about basketball, to lean on. And often I will phone her and say, is this a really silly question to be asking, or should this be on our radar? And there is that collaborative piece. So there's Sarah Bakovich who feeds in. Steve Timoney's wife, Alison Timoney, up in Glasgow. I've spent a little bit of time with her at one of the games, but not a huge amount. But I know she's had a huge influence up in Caledonia and is really involved up there. And then there's Jodie from Surrey, who is involved very much with Surrey, and is another female. So there is more and more representation, and we often do approach problems in a slightly different way to how the men do. But I think it's growing, and you know, I think the more of us that are more visible, it isn't a very comfortable position being singled out as the only female CEO or the only female GM, but actually the more that there are, I think the BBL will grow positively because of that.
Yeah, and you talk about the growth of the British Basketball League. I mean, I go up to their offices pretty much every other week up in Ealing, and obviously they've gone through a massive recruitment drive. You see the numbers of members of staff coming in, especially on the production side of things. But you know, you've got loads of women representation there. I mean, you've got like Anna Jones, for example, who I deal with pretty much on a day-to-day basis as head of comms. You've got Manny Gill, head of broadcast.
Came from Sky,
exactly. And then you look at like Claire Hatch, Natasha Ryle as well, who I know you've been in conversations with as well around events, and Natasha's obviously director of team services, so she's dealing with Mike on a week by week basis. But we're seeing a lot more women's representation in the league centrally. You look back 10 years ago, completely different to where it was, especially in the sporting industry. It's like we wonder why we've taken us so long to get to this point.
And I think it's that pathway piece, it's that visibility piece. You know, the more that women have gone through studying sport or, you know, university level, that have then gone into workplace, into jobs and have gradually risen up, that is the difference. And I don't want this to sound like too much of a male bashing, because actually there's a hugely important part of male advocacy. That's not validation, that's advocacy. The number of men that I talk to that now sit in meetings and say, I don't think that was really acceptable, that they've actually noticed that the woman has been cut across or interrupted or not gone to for the question. And actually don't think that it's acceptable that, when you're addressing an audience. Lauren was telling a story earlier. She's one of the first UEFA Pro licensed coaches in Wales. There's only 3 of them in Wales that are female that have got their UEFA Pro football license. And she'd attended a conference and a former male football manager was addressing the conference and just referred to everyone as guys all the way through. Those little pieces, but actually it was the men that noticed it and called them out. And it isn't about elevating women above men, it's about equality. And actually all of us being raised up together will only improve our performance, hopefully on and off the field or court.
Yeah, and of course with your broadcast background as well, I know the league's been heavily investing in broadcast this past year, and the representation, we're seeing more equality in the talent on air, for example, like Zania, and I did a game with Kyla Nelson last week as well. She was fantastic, and we're seeing more of that representation on screen as well, which is hugely important.
Yeah, and it's become the norm, right? I mean, it's not just women commentating on women's games. That's the big sea change as well, is that, again, going back to rugby and football, that, the voices, the female voices, it's now normal to hear on 5 Live or, BBC Sport or Sky Sports, you're hearing female commentators talking on men's games. And actually what's been really refreshing is, initially it was very much, I don't like voice, it's high pitch, that there was a lot of the anti-ness of, but it was actually just because you just weren't used to hearing a female voice. And now that's become much more normal. Actually, when you're listening to informed commentary, you'll listen and go, they're picking up just as, of course they're picking up just as good a points as the male counterparts. It's just they haven't had the opportunity. But it has become that normalcy of, like you say, hearing Azania and the others commentate, they're elite players within themselves. So of course they're going to have valid points, but it's just having that opportunity to speak. And as you say, Aaron Radin is the CEO of British Basketball League, and he has brought in a very diverse workforce to support him in the delivery of rising up BBL. And like I said, the aspiration is, we want to be the next biggest sporting sort of franchise outside of the NBA. Britain hasn't got a population of America, but that's what we'd be striving for.
Yeah. A key part of this whole conversation has been sort of inspiring the next generation. Before we wrap up this segment of the pod, for any listeners out there who may be sort of young women and looking to get inspired to maybe take on a career in the sporting industry, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, goodness. Do something that you love is mainly the first thing that I do. I mean, you can have a plan, but I never set out with a plan of thinking, I know I'm going to become CEO of a basketball team, or I'm going to be a group director. I did something that I loved. It just happened that I was involved in sport and I loved sport. I never thought I was probably actually ever going to work in sport. I worked in journalism for 15, 20 years. But when you find something and then you love it, you will do well at it naturally. So I don't think sticking to a prescribed plan, you talk about, Sheryl Sandberg talks about the, career, getting away with the career ladder, and actually it's a career jungle gym, I think is how she refers to it. And that's so true, because a ladder is really restraining and there's a very linear path. And actually what I would say to anyone wanting to get involved in sport is volunteer, and cut your stripes in all sorts of areas that you can go and look at and see, and then see what fits you best. And then when you look at an organisation and think, well, how can I value add to that organisation if I want to work in it? And that would be my main advice is to any female wanting to get involved, is don't be put off. If you think that it is just a male organisation, don't be put off, and be the first to try and break through.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think we can all sort of learn from that, hopefully inspire more women to get involved in the sporting industry. Sort of everyone's pushing towards driving that gender equality, which has been the theme for International Women's Day this year. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us on the Bristol Flyers podcast. Great chat, wasn't it, Sam?
Unbelievable chat. Learned so much from you, Lisa, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you for your lying.
Yeah, and have we still got a job as well, have we?
Yeah, well, you have. Sam doesn't.
There we go.
That's all right.
Sam, it's time for us to get to the news.
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers podcast.
Right, time for us to round up what's been going on around the British Basketball League over the past week. And let's start by talking about that game against Surrey Scorchers. I know you had it on mute, but did you were you really locked into it, or was it just one of those ones where you have it on the background while you're sinking a few beers?
It was. I did not sink any beers, Joe.
Fresh water, of course.
Not known for any of that. I'd, unfortunately, the most beautiful mountain backdrop. I was hanging out with my friends, and I had it on, and then it got exciting. I was watching, and I was like, for flip's sake, guys, come on, do it.
Well, let me run through it for you, because if you had it on in the background, I'll talk you through the game. Flyers, they fell to a 6-point defeat at home to Surrey on their return from the international break. The Scorchers took an early lead. They hit 10 threes in the first half. However, the second half, they only hit 1 3.
Oh, cool.
So they only made 11 threes total in the game. Interesting stat I've got here for you, actually. I was listening to, this is a very Dan Routledge stat, listening to Dan and Dave on the Sunday Night Breakdown podcast. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, go check it out. It's really, really good. Over the 4 games between Bristol and Surrey this season, Surrey obviously coming out on top, Surrey have shot 50 for 125 from 3 over all 4 games played.
That is a joke. What is that stat? That's like 46%
Yeah,
or
just
something.
under 50% it'll be.
That is a joke, Joel. It's not fair, man.
But the Bristol had an early response to Surrey. They charged back and they tied the game through Brad Green. Monster game from him. 20 points, 16 rebounds. The man just continues to dominate inside. Double-double, like just picking them up for fun. Collecting them like Pokemon cards.
Is he must average a double-double.
Yeah, yeah. He's leading the league in rebounds right now with 10.1 per game.
It is crazy, isn't it?
He has more double-doubles than he doesn't have double-doubles.
That's a
Try
lot of
saying that
double.
5 times fast.
He's got more double-doubles than not double-doubles.
Tough. In the second quarter, Surrey scored 21 points to take a 7-point lead into the half. The game got really physical, both teams battling foul trouble. Surrey pushed it out to a 15-point game heading into the fourth, but Flyers won the fourth period, 24-15, to make it a 1-possession game. It got really close down the stretch. Trajan Jacob missed a pair of clutch free throws to potentially bring us even closer. Keely Johnson kept us in the game with a 3-point play, but then Surrey sort of had a strong finish to the game to run out 74-80 winners. As you mentioned, Brad Green with a monster game, big double-double for him. It means Flyers fall to 8th in the standings with a record of 11-16, but they will look to bounce back this weekend as Leicester Riders visit the SGS College Arena. Tickets for that game are sold out for Sunday's game against Leicester Riders on Mother's Day. Tip-offs at 2 p.m. I've got to remind fans that tip-offs at 2 p.m. here because this was originally announced as a 3 p.m. tip-off. Back in January, we announced that it was brought forward for an hour for broadcast reasons because there's another game taking place 3 hours later and they're using the same commentary team, basically. So, reminder, the game does not tip off at 3. It tips off at 2. I can't stress that enough. We'll put reminders out on social media. If you arrive at 3, it will already be half-time.
So your Mother's Day lunch has been cut short by an hour, but that's not a problem. Bring your mother along. She will love it. Isn't that right, Joe?
She will. She will love it. All mums love Flyers basketball. It's the law. Also, got to give a big shout out to Jake Heenan in the house. Of course, we had him on the podcast last week. He was in the house watching the Surrey game, sat courtside in his new Flyers jersey that we got him last week.
Was he wearing it?
He was wearing it, yeah.
Did it fit all right? What do you think?
It looked all right. I couldn't really see from where I was sat because I was quite far away, but he's wearing his hoodie with his jersey over the top. Looked great.
Did you get a chance to speak to him?
No, I didn't. I was head down in work, unfortunately.
Yeah,
That's my
shame.
job. I was doing my job. So, big game against Leicester Riders this weekend. Tickets are sold out for that one. Also, the Flyers this week are playing an EMBL action on Thursday. However, we're putting this podcast out on Friday. So you will already know what happened on Thursday. We don't know what's happened yet here on the podcast when we're recording. So we will talk about Thursday's game against Cholet, the home leg of the EMBL playoff quarterfinal, on next week's show.
Nice.
So if you're wondering why we're not talking about it now, it's because we have no idea what's going to happen. We will actually talk about the first leg and we will preview the second leg on a future episode of the show. The second leg's on the 19th up in Cholet. The game, it will be live on the Bristol Flyers YouTube channel. We're doing the Cholet away game from here, and we're actually doing the home leg from SGS. But if you'd already know that because you would have watched it last night if you listened to the podcast on a Friday. So that's going to be exciting.
Best thing about the having a home leg first?
What's that?
Not having to do any aggregate scoring on our head, although you will have to do the aggregate scoring in the away leg.
God, I cannot stand commentating on a game trying to do maths after every bucket.
Could we have a conversation with someone we may or may not know from Bramvox?
Just Dan, can we put a graphic on the screen after the first leg to say which team's ahead or what, like +5 or +6, depending on what the game, like the score from
Dan,
last night's game was?
please.
I'm sure there'll be ways.
Can we do that, please?
Can you promise us that on the screen there will be a little counter showing who's ahead based on the aggregate?
Look, I can't promise that, no, but I will look into it.
Yeah.
Because it does make life easier, doesn't it?
It does make life easier.
I want your promise right now, Daniel.
I'm all about making life easier for all of us.
Thank you, Joel.
Right, other news to get to. We've got to talk about All-Star Game. Now, the All-Star Game is right around the corner, taking place on March 17th at the Copper Box Arena in London. Sam, on last week's show, we discussed the results of the fan vote for the All-Star Game starters, which saw BG, Brad Green, named the centre position for Team South. Shout out, Brad. This week, it's time for us to talk about the reserves. And the reserves were announced last week, and our very own Tevin Ollison making up the bench for Team South. He got the pick.
I think London coach saw him get 31 points against him and was like, I think he'd already decided by then, but that was a helper. He still want to get 31 points against him at home and was like, we need him in our team.
Yeah, so Team North will be headed up by Caledonian Gladiators head coach Gareth Murray. Team South will be coached by London Lions boss Petr Bozic. And the reserves, as we say, were announced last week. Get them up on screen, Dan! Here's the rosters for Team North and Team South. Of course, the starters for both were announced. So Larry Austin, Aaron Rye, Ethan Jaguar, Jordan Johnson, Taj Green starting for Team North. Teddy Allen is the captain alongside Sam Decker, Jaron Holmes, Matt Morgan and Brad Green, the starters for the South. Then the rules for this were each coach, Sam, had to pick one player from each club to make up their 5 bench players.
Yep.
So you can. This is where it gets picky. So, for example, if you pick, Clifton, you see Clifton Moore being selected as the backup centre for Team North. If you pick Clifton Moore, you can't then go and pick Pat Whelan, for example.
So they had to think in their heads, what do I need in terms of what position do I want to strengthen?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Strengthen that. And then, because Pat would have been a great shout as well, obviously.
100%. And everyone's going to have their own opinion on who was snubbed from the All-Star game, as you see in the NBA as well. Any All-Star snubs looking at those rosters from your opinion, Sam?
Oh, that is a great question, Joel. You've put me on the spot because I've not even had a real good chance to look at it. From the North, I think you could have had... I mean, you easily could have had Whelan. That probably is the snub, isn't it?
Could have also had Maceo Jack from...
yeah, big time.
Cheshire Phoenix. Producer Dan, any All-Star snubs for you? I know
Well, specifically the North or the South?
Go North first.
Or go either, yeah.
I mean, for me, the South, it's a shame TJ's not there.
Yeah.
So snubbed by his own teammate.
Yeah.
Snubbed by Tebo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That is
then
a shame.
In the North, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
I put you on the spot there, Producer Dan. I apologise for
You
that.
did. And to be honest, and genuinely, I was going to say Patrick Whelan, but you guys have talked about it.
Yeah, well, there you go. So those are the rosters for the All-Star Game, March 17th at the Copper Box Arena. We're going to be there, aren't we, Sam? Taking the podcast on the road.
I'm very excited for this.
Other things taking place at the All-Star Game is the slam dunk competition and the three-point shootout. Now, both of the lineups for both of those events have also been announced this week. Let's start by talking about the slam dunk competition. Trajan Jacob, talked about him not being named in the All-Star Game. That's because he's named in the slam dunk contest.
Look at that roster. That is looking sick, Joel.
Yeah, so there's 4 participants taking part that have been selected to take part in the dunk contest. Trajan Jacob alongside Jalen Pipkins of the Sheffield Sharks, Taj Green of the Newcastle Eagles, and Josh Sharma from the London Lions.
Sharma, question. Obviously, biggest in-game dunker probably in the league. What do you reckon his skills are going to be like?
It's the big difference between doing in-game dunks and then doing dunk competition dunks, I think. So it'd be interesting to see how we go. There's 2 bigs, 2 guards there in the lineup as well. So it's like, what are the bigs more suited to a dunk contest? Are the guards more suited to a dunk contest? We will find out on March 17th.
Well, I think looking at it, Green is one of the most athletic people I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think he has got a good handle as well. So he'll probably, I think, bring some good stuff out. But Pipkins is the most athletic I think I've seen in ages. Some of his dunks this season have been crazy, haven't they?
Yeah, and it's going to be just a quick one for the listener to run through sort of the rules of how this is going to be judged. The dunk contest takes place between the men's and the women's games. The 4 competitors, they battle it out above the rim in the contest across 2 rounds. All 4 compete in the first round, and then the 2 with the highest score advance to the final round. The first round consists of 2 dunks. Each contestant goes up, does 2 successful dunks. Each player gets scored then between 3 and 10 by the judges, who are yet to be named. Who's going to be the judges? I do not know. But the players with the highest score from the 2 dunks combined advance to the final round, and again they do 2 dunks in the final, and then it is the winner is announced from the cumulative total of the dunks decided in the dunk competition. So there you go.
Cumulative, all 4 dunks.
I think it's just the final ones.
Oh, fine.
We all get confirmation on that though. I'm just reading the rules off my notes here.
I think that's a good way of doing it. There's plenty of ways to do it, but that one will work fine.
What do you want to see TJ do at the dunk contest, producer Dan?
Well, enlighten me here. Are we talking costumes?
Well, here we go. This is what we came to talk about. I have said to TJ, whatever you need from us to do, like whatever you need. If you want to jump over us, yep, great. If you want to, get your phone out and do an Instagram live while you're dunking it, great.
Stop giving the players all the ideas, Joel.
If you want costumes, if you want props, we will source them for you. You haven't got to do the legwork. So I'm waiting for him to mess me back. I'm hoping he's practicing his dunks right now, and we'll see. What do you reckon?
Do you know what I think would be the coolest ever dunk, and it will be totally impossible to do? But have you ever seen those quick changes in magic shows where they throw like a load of confetti in and they're jump up mid-air, confetti down, change of outfit, 2-handed jam?
There we go. Let's make it happen.
Oh, why not?
Wouldn't it be a shame to do all that and miss the dunk?
Yeah. As you've got someone there sweeping it up, putting it back in the clothing again. Let me try it again.
Yeah. There you go. So, obviously, TJ taking part in the dunk contest. We've got to talk about the All-Star 3-point lineup, 3-point shootout lineup as well, the 3-point contest. That was announced this week by the league, with 4 players from the men's and the women's league going head-to-head. They see it on your screen. The participants are Matt Morgan from the London Lions, Megan Gustafsson from London Lions, Aaron Rye from Cheshire Phoenix, and George Gale from the Sheffield Hatters. Sam, I don't know about you, but I love how they've put stars from the men's and the women's leagues against each other in this competition.
I think it's going to be so good. Although I saw Matt Morgan firsthand against us, and I actually don't think he's a very good shooter, Joel.
Brilliant. Shot the lights out against us. Although saying that, Aaron Rye has only made around 20-odd 3-pointers this season.
Yeah, that is a bit bizarre. Go on, talk me through that decision. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, that obviously, I would like to see more competitors, because you got men's and women's players that have been snubbed here. Carly Samuelson, for example, snubbed. Quinn Cooper, snubbed. Patrick Whelan, snubbed. Conor Morgan, snubbed.
Do you know who the
Lucas Paliza, snubbed.
Do you know who the players all say that should go in the 3-point contest?
Who?
Pasquale.
Oh, yeah, of course. Pasquale. Snubbed. Scotty Landolfi should be in it. So it'll be exciting. But if you look at the NBA one, they had like 8 or 9, didn't they, players in there? And they also had the Steph versus Sabrina shootout, which I guess is where the inspiration here has come from to involve, have the women's players competing against the men's players in this competition. It's great to see, especially, the theme of International Women's Day this year being inspiring inclusion. This is the prime example. The league leading the way here. I'll tell you who else was snubbed from the All-Star 3-point contest. A couple of players, Skylar White of Cheshire Phoenix.
Oh, my goodness.
And Terrell Green, Plymouth City Patriots. Snub City.
Snubs.
I mean, you can't please everyone in this situation, so I understand where they're coming from, but I would like to see more participants in that 3-point shootout. But it will be great to watch, so I'm really excited to watch it. March 17th, down at Copper Box Arena. If you haven't got tickets, you can get them right now on the British Basketball League website. And the Bristol Flyers podcast will be in attendance for the All-Star game. So if you've got a ticket, if you're a Bristol Flyers fan, and you've got a ticket to the All-Star game, and you want to feature on our All-Star special episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast, do reach out. Let us know where you're sat at Bristol Flyers on all social media, or you can send us an email, hello@bristolflyers.co.uk, and let us know. We'll come find you, and you feature on the All-Star special. And that's it for this week's news.
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers podcast.
Right, time for us to wrap up this week's episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast. And usually this is the part of the show we do the mailbag segment. We've got no guests this week. However, we have had some entries into our mailbag, our email mailbag.
Some electronic mail.
Some electronic mail has died. We'll dive into the electronic mail. Producer Dan, we had a couple of emails come through, didn't we?
It was great.
Do you have these emails to hand on your phone right now?
I do indeed.
Would you like to read out the first email? This is the very first email that's ever come into the Bristol Flyers podcast, by the way. This is history being made right here. The first email has come in. I would love to make this a big part of the show where fans actually email us their dilemmas, their problems, and Sam and I are here to help you out. Bristol Flyers, anything Bristol Flyers, but any questions you got as well, fire our way.
You're making it sound like emails are like a new thing, Joel. It's like 2004 all over again.
You can just put a lot more characters and you can explain what you're talking about a lot more in an email than you can a tweet.
No,
Do you see what I mean? So if you can tweet as a question, but I feel like we want to learn more about our viewers and our listeners. So if you've got a big dilemma, you might have, I don't know, you might be babysitting, not able to make a Flyers game. We want to hear about it and we'll help you with your problem.
I will not be babysitting anyone.
Yeah, we'll fill in while you go to the game. Yeah, great. So we want to hear all these dilemmas, and the funnier, the more random, the better. Send them in to us. hello@bristolflyers.co.uk. Producer Dan, fire away with the first email.
Okay, first email comes from star of WWE in the early noughties, Matt Hardy.
Oh, what a fan!
And he writes in, "Hi Joel and Sam, long-time listener, first-time emailer inner. I have a question about Allstar I wanted to run by you and potentially discuss on the pod. Now, if Sam Decker is still injured when the All-Star game comes around, surely that'll mean that the next most voted for player will take his place. As of 14th of February, that player was none other than Bristol Flyers' Levi Bradley. All-Star voting closed on the 15th, so surely he's a lock. 3 Flyers in the All-Star game would be amazing. Lots of love, Matt Hardy."
Oh, shout out Matt Hardy.
Lots of love.
From the British Basketball League Daily.
Oh, that Matt Hardy.
That is Matt Hardy, yes.
Right.
Do you know, we didn't mention this, but Lisa Knights actually said the 3 acronym.
Oh, yeah, she said it throughout. It's only for you and I these days.
No, I know, but I reckon forfeits.
Forfeit for the boss. P45 on the way.
That's why I've been fired. Jolie, okay, cool. What do you think? You know the answer to this, don't you?
Okay, so I can actually confirm this here. So obviously, Sam Decker did play last week. He returned from injury.
Played very well.
He did. He scored 6 points in the first minute. London Lions. Who did they play? Leicester Riders, or was it the other game?
Leicester Riders.
Leicester Riders. So he actually returned last week. So he is actually back in contention. However, I actually asked this question to the league back during the voting process. And you would assume that the next highest vote getter is slotted in to the starting 5 should a player be injured. However, I was since told or confirmed by the league that the place belongs to the club. So, for example, if Sam Decker is injured, another London Lions player must fill in said place.
Do you know what? I don't hate that rule.
No. Because your club's earned it, so I feel like, yeah. I can see where he's coming from, because if you look at the NBA, you would have the next leading vote getter come in, or one of the All-Star reserves will go up into the starting 5 and another player gets called into the reserves and their replacement. There's a few options you can attack it, but essentially I was told that the place belongs to the club, so it'll be up to Petr Bozic to pick another player from London Lions that's not injured, that's not already a reserve, to put in that spot instead.
So, having met Matt many a times, I can hear the tone of, surely, he's being cheeky, I know he is, surely that means, looking at the numbers and the days, Levi should be in there.
Yeah, unfortunately, no Levi Bradley in the All-Star game, despite only playing a few games. It was a great effort by the Flyers family to really lead that campaign to get him into the... Well, he finished 3rd in voting for
Flyers
Team
and
South.
Cheshire.
Yeah,
probably.
well, obviously he played for Cheshire, so he's got some Cheshire fans as well. But what a campaign that was. Can you imagine if he got into the... All-Star starting lineup after playing, I think it was 4 games at the time. Amazing.
A bit like Teddy.
Yeah, well, don't go down that route. But he's played more games than that.
I know, yes.
Right, that's the first email. You got another email to get through?
I do indeed, yes. This one comes from Emma Fletcher, who says, "Hey Joel, Sam, and producer Dan. Hello.
Boo.
Hey, come on. I've got 2 questions for you, so I think we'll do these one at a time here, guys, that I'd love to hear you talk about on the podcast. The sensible one. What do you think are the main differences, if there are any, between the NBA style of play and the British Basketball League style of play?
Okay, so are we going to answer that first?
So let's answer that one first.
Firstly, my boo wasn't aimed at you; it was aimed at you, Dan, because you named him, and I don't know why I didn't want that, but that was the first thing. The second thing is, if you look at NBA basketball, Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do a lot. And I mean a lot focused around their point guard. It is a lot of pick and rolls at the top. They're aiming to sort of get them available to drive or shoot and then kick. Whereas we play in the British Basketball League, I believe, much more team basketball, trying to work in different ways to get lots of different people available, lots of different people free. Now, obviously, we have Americans come over, so we do see some of the American way come into it. But that is, in my opinion, one of the main ways in which it's different.
I would say also, yeah, I would agree. I'd also say the physicality, the size of players is a lot bigger. I mean, you think the guys are big right now, but if you look at like NBA point guards, they're looking at like 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" now, compared to your standard sort of 6 foot point guard that you see across Europe quite a lot. That's the sort of, and players playing multiple positions. Bigs coming out and shooting the three, having more versatile positions. You don't often see like that all-out traditional big man like a Brad Green in the NBA now at all. It's all about players that can do everything. Nikola Jokic, players that can pass, players that can pull out to the three-point line, players that can drive inside. Even Wembanyama, for example, like he's a ridiculous.
No, he's a freak.
He can shoot the three. He can drive inside. Giannis, for example, big, long, athletic players that are probably the same speed, if not quicker, than players in the British Basketball League, but like have that extra couple of inches in height, extra 3 or 4 inches in wingspan as well. That's probably the biggest. If you're a player making that jump up from British Basketball League to NBA, that is a huge jump to make in terms of adjusting to that physicality, the athleticism, and the extra height to deal with as well. So that's your question answered.
That's the sensible one. I've got a not sensible one now from Emma. My friends and I are curious to know how many steps Coach K does when he's walking up and down the sideline during a game. Thanks, guys. Love the pod. Love the Flyers. Emma.
Well, on that note, we shall organise a pedometer, whatever it is.
He actually wears his Apple Watch, so I might just ask him to track it.
Should we do it?
Yeah, I'll ask him. I'll send him a text message. If he's listening to the podcast, Andreas, if you could please track your steps for one of the 2 games this week, and then just text me how many steps you took during the game. That would answer Emma's question. Thank you.
Does that go from the second the first tip goes until the last whistle?
I reckon you should do it from the moment he walks into the SGS Wise campus to the moment he leaves the SGS Wise campus.
Okay, I hear that.
Yeah, there we go. So those 2 emails we've answered here on the Bristol Flyers podcast. If you've got an email you want to send us, we want to make this a new feature, the mailbag. So you can email hello@bristolflyers.co.uk. Send us your email. Send us your thoughts after a game, your dilemmas, whatever you want Sam and I to answer. Send it in to us. You can make them as long as you want, the questions as long as you want. We'll read them out here on the podcast. And yeah, it should be, fingers crossed, if we get enough emails coming through, could be a great feature for us going forward. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast. Sam, great episode. Important topics covered around International Women's Day and a bit of fun thrown in there as well. What do you think?
Excellent episode. As always, thank you, producer Dan, for coming and pushing the buttons for us. Thank you to our partners at WebGains for sponsoring the podcast. And a big thank you to Joel, who puts in a lot of effort to make this thing happen. Appreciate you, buddy.
I appreciate everyone listening in to the podcast. Thanks if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, recommend us to a friend. We're available every single week for the rest of the season on all major podcast providers and YouTube. Next week, we have to have a discussion around what we're doing next week. There's a few options down the line we can do. The following week will be our All-Star game episode. But until then, we'll have a meeting off air to discuss what's happening next week. But make sure you join us next week right here on the Bristol Flyers podcast, powered by WebGains.